student at Hillsborough Community College. And today we're going to be listening to Lauren Boone. She's going to be talking about the post-Cold War foreign policy for Syria. Interesting. And then we also have, she's over here, Susie Townley from Valencia College, and we're going to be hearing about the Arab Spring. So we'll start with Lauren.
Good afternoon. The Huffington Post says, in Middle Eastern bazaars, it's easy to get lost. Haggling is the order of the day, and things are never quite what they seem. In other words, they're a lot like America's ever-evolving policy on Syria. If you're confused or unsure about what exactly is going on in Syria right now, then that is understandable, and you're one of many, including the President of the United States. However, how America handles the situation and conflict in Syria is important, for it affects both our nation and the world. Today, I'll be helping you to better understand the situation by sharing a couple of pros and cons to America's intervention in Syria. The advantages of stepping in include first, controlling a hostile government, and second, avoiding chemical warfare. The disadvantages of this decision would be the assistance of a rebel force and the few benefits it provides for the United States. Let me begin by giving a little history and background on the conflict in Syria. According to the BBC, once the center of the Islamic Empire, Syria covers an area in the Middle East that has seen invasions and occupations over the ages, from Romans and Mongols to Crusaders and Turks. Today we see a different but equally as violent clash of forces in the country, involving the different diverse religious and political groups inside. This civil war is between the long-serving government ruled by the Assad family and those who want reform. Dr. Roger Shanahan, a former peacekeeper in Syria, explains that local areas formed their own militias with the aim of toppling the government and challenging the dictatorship running the country. All of this may seem unimportant or distant to America, but our own government seems determined to find a political solution to the Syrian civil war. Although the situation is tricky and complicated, the main benefits of American interference begins with controlling a hostile government. According to the Washington Post, in this extremely violent civil war, the government responded, "There's no getting around this," like monsters. This tyrannous regime killed, tortured, raped, and kidnapped many of those who were involved in the rebellion, including women and children. They're abusive and ruthless in their fight for power and control, and the term hostile government may even seem a little tame when describing them. By stepping in and acting as a mediator between the two fighting forces, we can begin to not only stop further atrocities, but dismantle a ruling family that is unapologetically cruel. The second purpose to jumping into the fray would be to avoid chemical warfare. The BBC states that in September of 2013, inspectors confirmed that chemical weapons had been used in Syria. Syria, however, denies using chemical weapons, which are banned under international law because the effects of their use are so horrific. Regardless of who is responsible for the use of chemical weapons, the United States is determined to disarm Syria of these illegal attacks. It is generally understood that chemical warfare is a banned practice, and the U.S. cannot risk such a dangerous weapon being used by the hands of Syria. It is obvious that bloodshed and fighting will continue in Syria for a long time, so that cannot be avoided. But the Huffington Post tells us the president's view. Obama said, "Syrian chemical attack is an assault on human dignity, an assault on our national security and the security of our allies." He said that there would be a large cost if the government did not act. So what does all that political jargon mean? It essentially translates to Obama is stepping in and insisting that Syria turns over their chemical weapons. So I'm sure by now you're thinking, well, it would seem like the best idea would be for America, which is one of the most powerful countries in the world, to step in and end all the fighting. However, it isn't that simple. and there are several disadvantages to America's interference that have to be taken into account. By defeating the Syrian government, we would in turn be assisting an equally dangerous rebel force. While many of these rebels are just innocent citizens, local militia, or refugees from the fray, CNN explains what the rest of the force is made of. Syria's al-Qaeda wing is known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and it's been gaining a greater foothold. Their affiliate in Syria is generally the most effective fighting force in Syria. It is listed as a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department in December. Essentially, if the U.S. was to get involved, they would have to choose between the lesser of two evils. Battling this evil giant government is an equally ferocious horde of Muslim Brotherhood, freedom fighters, jihadists, and Islamic extremists. This is frightening from an American perspective and poses all sorts of problems. Ari Ratner from the Truman National Security Project and a former Middle Eastern advisor says that we have no illusions about the prospect of engaging with the Assad dictatorship. It must go, but we are also very reticent to support the more hardline rebels. So the question is, do we support the rebel agenda by destroying their enemy? And this is the inward battle raging at our own capital. There are few, if any, personal benefits for the United States. Interference would be a costly effort. The Huffington Post states that an Iraq-style ground invasion would, in the very best outcome, accelerate the killing, costing a lot of U.S. lives. One of the biggest dilemmas is deciding if it is worth the human sacrifice on our part to save the lives of those who we really have no responsibility to protect. We are not required to attack or defend either party, and yet any decision made, even to do nothing, could greatly affect our country as a whole. It would also be costly in monetary terms, and the WNYC, a prominent New York radio station, suggests that U.S.-led airstrikes might not solve anything and will likely draw Western powers deeper into conflict. The two words that really describe Syria right now are stalemate and deadlock. What political deadlock and military stalemate mean is that it's turning into a war of slow destruction. It's a long war and it's a costly war. Obviously, the construction, planning, and performing of these airstrikes would be an expensive endeavor with little hope to end the conflict. From these examples, it has become obvious that the situation in Syria is far from simple. Any decision could be a detrimental one, and any delay could further the damage. Not even those in office know the answer to the issue at hand. Jay Leno jokes that last night, President Obama spoke to the nation about Syria. First, he laid out his reasoning for a strike against Syria, and then he gave the rebuttal. Hopefully, Americans who were confused about the president's plan feel better now, knowing that he's a little confused too. It's obviously a hot mess that requires a lot of careful planning, negotiating, and decision-making. So whether or not the United States government solves the issue in the near future, now at least you can better understand some of the pros and cons to America's involvement and intervention in the Syrian civil war. Thank you.